If you are able, would you please stand for the reading of the Word of God? We're reading Luke 12:42-48. And the Lord said, "Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom his master will set over his household, to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant, whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that servant says to himself, 'My master is delayed in coming,' and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the unfaithful. And that servant, who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know, and did what deserved a beating, will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more." You may be seated.
Thanks, Kent. Good job. Love that. If you're a first-time guest with us today, we're glad you're here. After the worship service is over, if you would make your way to the guest services station there in the back left-hand corner of the room, we would just want to give you a free gift. It's a book called Unshakable, Standing Strong When Things Go Wrong. So again, if you're a first-time guest, please just don't be shy. Go back there. You don't have to do anything. Just say, "Hey, I'm new here," and they'll give you a free book on your way out. As our way of saying thank you for joining us. After the service is over, also, we have a very brief congregational meeting to affirm the elders. And I'll just say, I say this every time, right? We didn't hear anything from anybody, concerns or anything like that. So when we do the affirmation today, I expect what? 100%, right? And I will say this, we are not the leaders of the church, right? Jesus is the leader of the church. He's the head of the church. Our responsibility, all of our responsibility really is to listen to what God may be saying and then move our church that direction. So, but we appreciate your support in all of that. We're nearing the end of this message series. I think I've said that a couple of weeks now. We really are nearing the end of this message series called Rooted Inward, the big tree. That's why it's here, being rooted in our foundations of Christianity. This has been a 10-week series. We will conclude this series next Sunday, on Easter Sunday, and we'll be talking about eternity in light of the resurrection. So be sure to invite your family, your friends. Let's fill this place up for Jesus Christ, and let's maybe make it standing room only. I love when we have to put more chairs down. So invite as many people as you can to come next Sunday. We'll conclude this message series and start a new one the week after. So we've been talking about the basic and essential truths to our Christian faith and really trying to form deep roots into what we believe. And as I mentioned at the start of the worship service, today we're going to talk about stewardship. And everybody went, "Yeah, stewardship." And I'm telling you, I love teaching on this topic myself. Some of you are like, "I'm going to head for the door. All he's going to talk about is money." I promise I don't know that I talk much about this money in this message today. It's really about being a steward of what God has given to us. If you've ever loaned something to somebody of any significant value to you, then you kind of know this feeling. Maybe it was a car that you loaned out, maybe it was a tool, or maybe it was something very sentimental to you that you loaned out. Whatever it was something that mattered to you. It was very important to you. And when you handed it over to the person who was borrowing it, you probably might have said something like, "Hey, just be sure to take care of this." Have you ever said that? Be sure to take care of this. Why? What we're really saying is, I'm trusting you with something that matters to me, right? I'm trusting you with something that's very important to me, so please take care of it. Now, here's the question. What if we treated everything in our lives like that? What if our time, our relationships, our abilities, our responsibilities, what if they're not actually ours? What if they really don't belong to us? And I believe that's what Jesus is getting at in this passage that Kent just read to us in Luke chapter 12. Jesus wasn't just talking about money. He's talking about everything. He's talking about stewardship of everything. It's how we manage. Stewardship is how we manage everything that God has entrusted to us. And so Jesus tells this story about a group of servants who were waiting for their master to return. Some are faithful, however, some are careless, and some are outright rebellious. But the difference between them comes down to this: what did they do with what they were given? What did they do with what they were given? And so what I want us to do is discover 5 key concepts of biblical stewardship that we'll find in this passage. And if you're taking notes, here's the first one. Number 1, a steward manages something that belongs to somebody else. A steward is a manager of something that belongs to someone else. Jesus begins with a question, and he asks, who then is the faithful and sensible manager? Your translation may say steward. Who is the faithful and sensible manager? And right away, he uses this very important word, manager. Not owner, but manager. It's actually one of the few instances that Jesus uses this word in the New Testament. In fact, it's one of 4 times Jesus uses this word in the New Testament. 1 here, and then 3 more times in another parable he tells later on in the Gospel of Luke. So he tells it in 2 stories. He uses this word in 2 stories and only 1 time in this passage. So it's very important. It comes from the Greek word oikonomos, which actually means someone who manages an estate for the owner while the owner is out of town. And deeper than that, it actually, his main responsibility is for the welfare of the other servants. And I find that interesting because in the passage, what did we read? One of the servants was actually beating another one, right? So it's important that we understand this. So a manager is someone who manages the estate for the owner while he's out of town, and especially the welfare of the other servants. Now, we also get this word economist from this word. Economist. An economist is someone who comes up with a plan to manage another person's resources, or maybe even a country's resources, right? That's what they're hired to do. So Jesus is saying that a faithful servant or a faithful manager knows his place. He understands that the master owns everything in the estate and the estate itself. And his job, the manager's job, is to manage what the master has entrusted to him. The foolish servant is the one who believes the estate he's managing no longer belongs to the master, but believes it actually belongs to him. And maybe that could be rational. You know, you think about it as the longer I manage something for somebody, maybe I feel like it belongs to me, right? It feels like it's mine. And so those are the foolish managers who think, well, it doesn't belong to him anymore, it's actually mine. Good servants don't confuse their roles. They understand that everything they have is not theirs, but that everything they have belongs to their owner. They're just managing the owner's affairs. Now, think about it maybe in terms of a rental car. A rental car. If I go out of town, I rent a car to get around from point A to point B, right? And for some, that's a bad thing. Like, maybe they don't care, but for me, if I rent a car, like, I'm gonna be good at it, right? I'm gonna treat it well. It's like, I'm not gonna take that rental car out and have it spray painted a different color. I would love to, especially if it's not orange. I'm going to make sure I maintain the vehicle as well, right? If it runs out of gas, I need to go get gas. I'll put gas in. I'm going to take care of that car while it's in my possession. I'm not going to just drive it around haphazardly and run it into a ditch. I'm not going to be careless with this vehicle. Why? Because it belongs to someone else. I'm accountable to that someone else. I'm accountable to the owner. I know that eventually I'm going to have to return this vehicle. And if I return this vehicle either damaged or these days without a full tank of gas, they're going to charge me for it, right? So that's what happens. So I'm going to take good care of this car because it's not mine. I'm going to take care of this car as if it belongs to someone else, and I'm going to turn it back maybe a little better than what I got it, right? Now let's bring this idea into our lives. Psalm 24:1, you may be familiar with this passage. It says, "The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord." They belong to the Lord. That includes our time, our money, gifts that people give to us, our family, our influence, our opportunities, everything. None of it ultimately belongs to us. So we are managers, not owners. So we believe that everything we are and everything that we have belongs to God. Everything belongs to God. Imagine this, and this is how I like to think about it. You're standing before God someday, and we're saying to God, this is what I did with what you gave me. This is what I did with what you gave me. That's stewardship. That's what God calls us to. So stewardship begins when we shift our thinking from mine to his. That's stewardship. Here's the second biblical concept of stewardship. Number 2. Faithfulness is measured in the ordinary. Faithfulness is measured in the ordinary. The faithful manager in Jesus' story, he's not doing anything extraordinary, right? In fact, verse 43, it says that he's just doing his job. Like this guy, he's showing up to work. He's feeding the servants when they need to be fed. He's showing up consistently. He's just doing his job. That's faithfulness. That's small, right? Jesus, for doing this, he calls him blessed. The NIV says it will be good for that servant. It'll be good for that servant. So you're blessed if you just simply do your job. Now let me ask a question, and this is very important. So by show of hands, how many of you rinse off your dishes before you put them in the dishwasher? All right, no liars out there. I probably just started World War III in some of your homes. And so, but here's what's interesting. I was reading an article last week, and the article was stating that the way a person puts away the dishes in the dishwasher, whether or not he or she rinses the dishes off, says a lot about who they are. No joke. This is like psychology, right? So I'm reading this article. I'm like, apparently you can tell a lot about a person by the way he or she loads the dishwasher. Now think about this, right? You're at home. How do you load your dishwasher? Like, you don't do it from a stage, right? You're not doing it in public for everyone to see. Well, maybe sometimes, you're not making a ruckus, hopefully. You're just doing your job, right? Hopefully. You can tell a lot about a person by how they load the dishwasher. It's about the small unseen moments in this one activity, right? Do they load it correctly? Do they leave it for someone else? Do they quietly take care of it? Or they make a big noise, letting everybody else in the house know, hey, I'm loading the dishwasher now, right? Do they rinse their dishes off first? This is important stuff, right? Oh, come on. This is a small, menial task. But it's in the small stuff that really matters. It sounds so small and minuscule, but it reveals something deeper, and that is faithfulness is found in the ordinary. It's being consistent. How often do we think, God is impressed by the big moments in our lives? We just want to impress God. So you know what, this Sunday, I'm going to double my tithe. I'm going to show God, right, just how good I am. It's in those big moments, right? Or maybe from a big platform. Man, I get to share my testimony in front of the whole church on Sunday morning, right? Big platform. God's going to be impressed with that. Or maybe it's big achievements. Man, I read the Bible through in less than a year. Isn't that great? Big achievements. Or I served this weekend at the fairgrounds. I love that. How many of you served this weekend at the fairgrounds? I'm just kind of curious. Yeah, wasn't that fun? It was really cool. We touched a lot of lives on Saturday. Thank you, Chantel. I don't even know if she's in the room, but thank you, Chantel, for organizing that, putting that together, reaching the community. But anyway, big achievements. Like we pat ourselves on the back. Look what I did for God, and we think God is so impressed, when in reality, Jesus seems to be pointing us to something else, and that's consistency. Faithfulness is being patient with our kids when we're tired. It's choosing integrity at work when no one else is watching. It's showing up spiritually even when we don't feel like it. It's consistency. Maybe you've heard the story of St. Paul's Cathedral in London years ago in the 17th century. In 1666, a fire, the Great Fire they call it, ripped through the city of London. And the world's most famous architect, Christopher Wren, was tasked with rebuilding St. Paul's Cathedral in London. 5 years later, in 1671, one day, Wren was watching 3 bricklayers on a scaffold. One was crouching, one was kind of half standing, and the other one was standing upright. And Wren went over and he asked each bricklayer, what are you doing? And the first guy, he said, man, I'm a bricklayer. I lay bricks in order to feed my family. And I work hard at that. Second bricklayer said, well, I'm a builder. I'm building a wall. But the third bricklayer, who was the most productive of the three, replied with a twinkle in his eye, and he said, I'm a cathedral builder. I'm building a great cathedral to the Almighty. It's all the same work. It's all the same work, but there's a different perspective. Faithfulness sees purpose in the ordinary. I'm building a wall. I'm building a cathedral to the Lord Almighty, right? God is not looking for perfection, but man, he sure is looking for consistency. Are we showing up on time? Are we doing our thing for the Lord, right? Consistency. Another biblical concept of stewardship is number 3, accountability is coming. Dun, dun, dun. Accountability is coming. We will be accountable. Jesus seems to shift his tone there in verse 46. He says the master's going to arrive on a day and a time when no one expects him. And we look at him and go, there is a moment of evaluation that is coming in my life at some point. And maybe some of us, we don't like that idea, but for most of us, maybe all of us, it's actually good news. It's kind of like performance reviews at work. We know they're coming, but maybe for some of us, performance reviews can be kind of stressful, and so we go, But however, the performance reviews also mean that what we do matters. There's value in what we do, and so we get reviewed on that, right? Our effort is seen. There's a purpose behind our role. And that's why we do these reviews. Imagine a job where no one ever evaluated anything. What would the point be? Maybe we never received any feedback. There's no accountability. It would probably feel meaningless. Like, why am I showing up for this job? Nobody cares. What's the point, right? But with God, evaluation means that our lives matter, that we're important, that there's something very important with what we do. Every choice we make, every moment we live, every opportunity that we do or do not take advantage of or capitalize on matters to the Lord. Every little thing matters to the Lord. Now, I want to be clear here because it's easy to start thinking about salvation, right? Is my salvation based on works and all of that? So let me be very, very clear. This is not about salvation. Remember Ephesians chapter 2. You probably know this verse very well. Verses 8 and 9 on the screen. It says, for you are saved by performance. Oh, okay. Whew, you caught that one. No, you're saved by what? Grace. It's grace through faith, and this is not from yourself. It is God's gift. It's not from works so that no one can boast. We're saved by grace, not performance. But once we belong to God, we're accountable for how we live. That's that repentance part we talk about before we get baptized or immersed, right? We're accountable for how we live. In fact, right after Ephesians 2, verses 8 and 9, comes Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. And it says, for we are his workmanship, created in Jesus Christ for good works. So you can't have faith without works, right? So God calls us to do good works. And eventually we're going to be evaluated on our good works and probably bad works. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells another parable, a different parable about a master who's going away, and he entrusts some money to his servants, 3 servants, right? 2 of the servants, they go right away and they invest their money, and they earn back twice the amount. It's great, right? The third one, what an idiot. Right? What an idiot. He goes out and what's he do? He buries it, right? What a jerk. Like, we would never do that, would we? Yeah, come on. Let's not be that naive. Anyway, he goes out and buries it. Master comes back. He rewards the first 2 who went out and invested the money and earned money back. And the third one, he's very disappointed with that guy, and he throws him outside into the darkness where there's a lot of suffering, weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's bad. Now, I want you to notice this. The issue isn't that the guy failed. The issue is that the guy did nothing. He did nothing. And so we don't just live. We don't just live. We will give an account on how we live, on it all. Kind of leads me to number 4, and that is neglect is just as serious as rebellion. Neglect is just as serious as rebellion. In the story, Jesus describes different kinds of rebellion. You know, One kind is, a servant who abuses the other servants. There's the servant who gets drunk and careless. And then there's the servant who simply ignores his responsibilities. And all three are held accountable for their actions. And that can be kind of sobering, because it means that it's not just about what we do wrong. It's about what we fail to do right. It's like those moments when we know we should say something, or maybe we should do something, we should do the right thing. You ever been there? I've caught myself. We know we should encourage that person who's struggling. We know maybe we should put our arm around that person and pray for that person right then and there. We know we should speak some truth into that person's life. We know we ought to make the right decision. We ought to do the right thing, and then we don't. And then we're left thinking, man, I really missed it, didn't I? Later on, we're thinking, I should have said something. I should have done the right thing. And that's what Jesus is talking about, the neglect. Let's say we've been given a beautifully wrapped gift. It's ornate, it's beautiful, and we take it home, and we set it on a shelf, or we set it on a mantle, and we admire that beautifully wrapped gift. But we never open it. We just leave it there. We sit there and admire how beautifully wrapped this gift is. We don't know what's inside. We never open it. We never use it. We never even look inside. And that's what it looks like to ignore our calling or avoid responsibility, to neglect our gifts or to bury our gifts. That's what it looks like. We're accountable not just for our actions, we're accountable for our inactions as well. How are we doing being stewards of what God has given us? Here's the last one, number 5. Privilege increases responsibility. With privilege comes responsibility. I think we all know that, right? And Jesus, at the end of his parable, he says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be required. And then from the one who has been entrusted with much, even more will be expected, right? This is where it gets really personal, because we are a people who have been given much. We are people who have been given much. There are believers around the world, they don't even own a Bible. They don't have the freedom to go and gather things freely. They risk their lives every day for their faith, and yet so oftentimes their faith is so incredibly strong. We admire that, right? Meanwhile, here we are in the United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave, and man, we got it all, don't we? We have multiple Bibles. We have multiple Bibles at home, sitting on shelves, maybe in our office. We've got multiple Bibles. We have unlimited access to just about anything we could ever want or dream of, and we have freedom to worship whenever we want. And yet, man, I wonder, how often do we take all of this for granted? We just take it for granted, like it's going to be here the next day and the next day and never go away, right? And Jesus is saying that what we've got, this isn't just a blessing, this is a responsibility. This is a responsibility. This is huge. The more we know, the more we're accountable for. The more we know, the more God expects us to live it out. It's kind of like a coach and the expectations that he has for different players on the team. Now, he expects all his players to play well, but like with the veteran players, I think he expects more out of veteran players than he does his rookies and beginners. They know more. They've been given more experience. They have more training. They have more opportunity. And so more is required. More is required. And I think Jesus looks at us and says, boy, you've been given much. You have a lot of experience. We are veterans at this Christianity thing. Do your job and do it well. At the end of the story, Jesus, he paints a pretty clear picture of what's going to happen. Some servants, they waste what they've been given, and some servants are faithful. And the difference isn't talent, it's not opportunity, it's not success. The difference is faithfulness. Faithfulness. At the end of our lives, we're going to be standing before God, not with everything we've ever achieved, but with everything that God has entrusted to us. And we're going to say, Lord, here's what I did with what you gave me. Here's what I did with what you gave me. And we're not going to long to hear from the Lord, well done, successful servant. Or well done, impressive servant. Or well done, busy servant. The words we're going to long to hear from Jesus is, well done, good and faithful servant. Because in the end, stewardship it's not about how much we have, it's about how faithful we were with what we were given. So that's our call this week. How are we doing? Stewardship. With everything that we have, it all belongs to the Lord. Are we doing what God has called us to do?